Chapter 9. They took her back to the cabin just outside of town. Tina planned to meet them at the cabin later that night. Mel wanted a shower before she had to deal with Tina again. When she walked into her bathroom, she saw that bathing might be a problem. "Krista!" It was a familiar frustration that laced her words, one that Krista had learned to embrace over the years. Mel stared at the circle of sand and candles situated in the white porcelain tub where she'd been planning to relax. The candles were a mix of black and white, the sand shared the same colors. Inside it all, Mel saw a lock of what she assumed was her hair bound with an elastic hairband. Krista took her time in joining her, but after a moment she appeared in the doorway. "What?" Mel's jaw nearly dropped. She jerked her hand and pointed at the spell brewing in her tub. "Why is this here?" Krista took one look at the project and smiled. "You wanted the teleportation charm, and if you had waited another day we would have pulled you out." She gestured at the center of the circle. Mel noticed that the bundle of hair was sitting on a small pile of ash. Once it's dissolved completely, it's as safe as teleportation ever is. Even half dissolved, it'll be usable in a few hours. She paused and then continued. "If you're feeling lucky." "But why is it in my bathroom?" Mel persisted. Krista huffed. "Like I was going to waste my space while you were locked up in some lion's dungeon? Please. Anyway, I'll be happy to sleep for a week once that's ready to go. I don't know if I've ever done so much magic in my life." She walked away, but that didn't stop Mel from calling after her. "I'm glad you were so concerned for my safety." Krista showed her worry with one finger. Mel would have laughed if she thought it was in jest, but the time for jokes was long past. Mel gave up hope of a shower and decided that a quick meal before bed would be almost as good. The kitchen was stocked with plenty of frozen food, and she grabbed a box at random. Taste was not her goal at the moment. Bob walked into the kitchen while she set the timer on the microwave. He sat on one of the stools and watched her without comment. Mel didn't feel like speaking either. She let her food cook and watched the timer count down. She could practically feel Bob's eyes on her for all 90 seconds. Only when she had pulled the tray out of the microwave and begun to blow on the steaming contents to cool them off did he start to speak. "Did you turn suicidal all of a sudden?" Mel let the dinner drop and looked at her old partner. His dark skin seemed to drink in all of the light in the kitchen and nearly gave off an almost ethereal glow. She could see something dark slithering deep in his eyes, something ancient that he usually kept hidden. "What makes you think that?" "Nothing you've done in the past few weeks has suggested otherwise." He laced his fingers together and set them on the counter. She picked up her fork and stabbed at the chicken and noodles. "I don't want to die. I'm just determined." "How has that worked out for you?" When he said things like that, Mel knew that Bob had to be much older than he put on. Most everyone she met was. Anyone with a lick of magic lived far beyond the 80 to 100 years that regular humans hoped for. But most magic types didn't bother to hide their years either. If she asked Bob how old he was, she knew that he'd smile and say 30, just like he had when they met 8 years ago. But Bob's question stung. "Are you talking about Cincinnati because—" He held up a hand before she could offer her excuse. "Krista will get over it someday. You did what you had to do." "And what about you?" Bob unclenched his hands and stood. "You're one of the best damn thieves out there. Working with you is an honor, and I know you'll do what you have to do to get the job done. If the payment is right, we can continue to be colleagues." She thought he was done, but he continued after a moment. "But if I can't count on my friends, then I don't know what the point is." He left without another word. Mel ate her sad-looking TV dinner alone. She didn't have time to deal with all of this bullshit between her team members. They were going to get the job done. That was it. Then they would go their separate ways. She and Krista weren't kids anymore. They didn't need to hold each other's hands and reassure themselves that no one could hurt them. Plenty of people could hurt them. That was just how it was. Mel threw her tray of food away and went to lay down. She had earned her nap. Before Tina was supposed to meet them that night, Krista placed a cerulean marble into Mel's hand. "It's just like the last charm," she said. "Only you can break it. Think of a place really hard, and you should end up there. It'll be fresh enough to work with for a month, but it might kill you." She walked off before Mel could thank her. Just after sunset, Krista took down the ward, and Tina drove up the gravel driveway in a beige sedan that was at least 20 years old. Mel hadn't even seen the gem after she buried it, and she couldn't wait to get rid of the thing and take her payment. This job had been far too weird. The faster she could leave Eagle Creek, the better. And she wouldn't even think about that alpha. Tina stepped out of the car. She still looked like she was in her 40s and wore dark colors. Mel thought that she must have been wearing a glamour of some sort. It was difficult to make out where the woman ended and the darkness of the night began. Clever. Mel would need to see if she could purchase a charm like that off one of her contacts. The older witch carried a small wooden box in her hands. She smiled at Krista and nodded to Mel. She refused to acknowledge Bob. "Melly, Chris! I knew you girls could do it." Mel could have choked on the saccharine sweetness of her tone. "Is that my payment?" Mel asked. She wouldn't be bitter, but neither would she be nice. This was purely business. Without warning, Tina threw the box at her. Mel caught it and flipped the small metal clasp open. Inside was a small key. "And where's the safety deposit box? And why didn't you just bring it with?" she asked. Tina grinned and held up a note card. "Written down here, my dear, and safety first. Now, may I see the item?" Mel could hear Krista heave a sigh, and she looked over just in time to catch her rolling her eyes so hard that her head had to hurt. But a truck pulled up behind Tina's car before Krista could flash the stone, and judging by the frozen set of Tina's shoulders, no one was supposed to have followed her. "Who are your friends?" Bob asked. Tina looked behind her, and when she faced them all again, all color had drained from her face. "Sweetie," she asked her daughter, "could you put that ward back up before we have unpleasant company?" Mel got a good look at that truck. It was dark gray with mud splattered all around the bottom. The light was dimming, but it looked like there was some kind of cover on the bed. The truck looked familiar, but she dismissed the thought. She had seen hundreds of gray trucks in her life. Why would this one be special? "I'm spent," said Krista. "All I can do is make it so they can't hear us." Tina pursed her lips and steeled her shoulders, but she said nothing else. "Who is that?" asked Mel. "You didn't think I wanted the gem for myself, did you?" Tina replied. She held out a hand. "Let's just finish the trade and nothing bad will happen." "What's going on, Mom?" Krista bit out the words. Tina still didn't answer. "Just give me my gem, please." With a huff, Krista pulled the velvet bag out of her pocket and handed it to her mother. "Fine, here's your stupid rock. We're done now." She looked at Mel and nodded to Bob. "Right? Business concluded?" Mel nodded. "Yeah. Thanks for your help." She barely got out the last word when 2 men stepped out of the truck. Ice shivered down Mel's spine. Even 100 feet away, she could tell that there was something wrong about them. Their skin was white, nearly glowing in the dusky moonlight, and they moved with serpentine grace that looked wrong on the human form. Mel saw Tina glance back once. "You hired us to work for vampires?" she hissed. Krista had been about to walk away, but she stopped. "Did you want to get us killed?" "It'll be fine," Tina told them. "I've worked with some of them before, and I'm still very much alive." Mel wasn't so confident, but she thought quickly, trying to reason out why vampires would want Luke's special gem. "Is it magical?" she asked. The velvet bag had already disappeared from Tina's hands. "Does it matter?" Her tone suggested that it wasn't a question. Both vampires were too close for Mel to argue further. She nodded for Krista to drop the sound ward so that they could talk. As they approached, Mel studied them. Though vampires came in all races, these 2 were as white as the moon. And like it with every vampire she'd ever seen, there was something off about them. Their skin looked as if blood didn't pump steadily through their veins. Instead, it swirled and stalled, leaving strange patches of red almost like blush all over. And they smelled wrong. It wasn't decay. Vampires weren't undead, but it was something sickly sweet. Whatever magic extended their lives was the dark kind that required blood sacrifice. And while witches stank of magic, the vampires smelled of death. Tina nodded towards the brunette. "Vladimir?" And then towards the blonde. "Ivan?" "Russians. Great." Whether these were the kind of vamps who lived up the Dracula lifestyle or not would determine exactly how much blood was about to be shed. "Ms. Anders." Vladimir spoke with a flat American accent. That probably made him old. Anyone younger than 100 didn't bother or hadn't learned to cover their speech so well. The old ones could sound like they were from anywhere. "This is your girl?" Mel wouldn't let herself be afraid, though she felt a bit ill with his eyes crawling all over her. Tina smiled, her words bright. "Best person for the job." She held up the velvet bag. "I taught her everything I know." If the situation weren't so dire, Mel would have laughed at the ridiculousness of that statement. But Tina had always been the better talker. No need to test that now. Vladimir looked at Mel. "You gave this to her, yes?" While his accent was right, his phrasing was stilted. Maybe he wasn't quite as old as originally thought. Mel nodded. He held out a hand to Tina. "Then you give to me." Mel heard a car race down the highway. It had to be speeding to be so loud. The engine rumbled, disturbing some of the birds in a nearby tree. Tina placed the bag in the vampire's hand just as headlights flashed at the end of the driveway, temporarily blinding Mel. "What the hell is this?" Now some of the Russian crept into his speech. "You have other buyers?" "What? No!" Tina looked at Mel, but neither Mel nor the rest of her team spoke. Ivan touched Vladimir's arm, and the two spoke quietly in Russian. Mel could barely hear them over the idling engine and wouldn't have understood them anyway. She traded looks with Tina, Krista, and Bob. A truck door flashed open, and the enraged roar of a lion pierced through the night.